Welcome. In today's tutorial, we're going to discuss setting up PTO plans and the different types that there are. So to do this, you will go to Configuration and click on PTO Plans. You can either edit the one that's in here based on how I'm showing you how to set these up, or create your own. So when we do this, add new PTO plan, we're going to give it a code. This just needs to be different from any other code that is in the system. I usually use numbers for code and alphabet for description. And we've got this in. Now we need to choose which type or types that we're going to set up. So let's try personal and sick. I need to add a maximum hours before I can save this. I normally put in 9999 so it doesn't bother me for anything. If they have a minimum request, they can do it in a given time. You can add that here. Negative balance. If you allow them to have a negative balance, then you would select this. Otherwise, if you're trying to approve PTO for them or give them PTO and they don't have the balance, it will not let you. So I'm just going to select these. These are your call. It's up to your company policy. This and this. Really, unless the employee is using the e-time clock for the timesheet entry, we don't have to worry about these. Ignore, deduct, approve PTOs on import. If I'm importing balances, do I want to ignore future approved and just insert that balance that I'm bringing over? Or do I want the system to take a look at what they've been approved for in the future and deduct it from the balance I am bringing in? Your call as far as that goes. Not many people are going to import PTO balances. Normally, if you're setting up accruals, it's going to take care of that itself. But there are some cases where you may choose to import the balances on a startup, for instance. Enable PTO accrual. This is what we're going to use, but I don't want to select it yet because I want to save this as it is and get it written in stone up here. That way, if I make a mistake on something else, I don't have to start from scratch again. So there we go. It's in here. I want to click Edit, and we see everything we set up. I'm only going to do the accrual for one at a time. Even if I'm using annual accruals, I'm going to leave this alone right now. I slide my bar to the right, and I'm going to click the View under PTO Accrual Configuration. And this brings up how I want to set my accruals. Now, apply max benefit year accrual. This might work on something like sick time, where they get 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. If we calculate that out based on 2,080 hours of work, that's going to come to 69 hours. The law in most states dictate that it stops at 40. So to do that and keep them accruing like they do, we utilize the max benefit year accrual, and that's based on either their hire date, anniversary date, benefit date, or company annual accrual rollover date, which we would put into the back end for you. The benefit or anniversary date would require you to go to the employee details and add those specific dates to each of the employees for this to work as far as that goes. We can leave it on hire date. Now, I mentioned sick. We're working on personal right now. Another instance that this might work is if you've got an accrual rate of 2.67 hours per pay period, and you want, the employee rule is you get 40 hours for the first year. Well, 2.67 might give just over the 40 hours. It could be 40.09, 40.23, something like that. And you don't want to figure it out based on 5 digits to get it closer. You can use the max benefit year accrual, and then when we set it up, we'll set that at 40. So that will stop them from getting that 0.20 or something like that. Accrue overtime. This is if they're getting X amount of accrual based on the hours worked. Do you want to use overtime hours to go into that? Typically it's no. Same with percentage. Exclude pay types on accruals. Again, if they're doing X amount of hours per hour worked, and maybe you don't want them to get that on holiday. If they work the holiday or any other items you have in here, if you don't want them accruing time towards it, such as vacation or things like that, you can utilize that and exclude those pay types from being in the calculation when giving out accrual time. Typically, this is always going to be on time of service. Um, and I say always, accrue time from, and again, hire date, anniversary date. If you've got something different, start their benefit on a specific date. You can, most times these are on hire date. So that defines how long they've worked for the company and what tier that they happen to be on. So these are usually left like this, but because we have the ability to use these different dates, you could set those up in the employee details and utilize those for these different items. Now, the important parts down here is time of service unit. You've got year. From 0 years to 2 years, they get X amount per hour worked, X amount per month per year, something like that. I really don't use year. I'm a little more exacting. I go right down to the month. And when I'm doing that, the only thing is I minus 1 month from the end month when I'm setting these up. The reason being is when they start working, it is 0 month because it's not a complete month. So 0 month to 23 months in actuality equals 24 months. So I use it on there because I know that works and I haven't played around with the year that much. Feel free to do whatever's easiest for you as far as that goes. Time unit. How do they accrue their time? Is it based on the number of hours they worked? Is it based on their pay period, a monthly accrual, or a yearly accrual? I'm just going to go by the year. So basically they get 40 hours for the first 2 years they work and so forth. So now that I've got this here, and I don't worry about this, I click Add New PTO Time of Service. And we're going to do the first 2 years, 0 to 23 months. They're going to earn 40 hours each year, and they're going to carry forward 40. The maximum they can have in their account at any one time is 80 hours. This is different from the max benefit year accrual. Their benefit year accrual could be 120 hours, but the maximum they can have in their bank will be 80, which means if I didn't use any last year, I got another 40 this year. I'm now sitting at 80. Even though my max yearly accrual is 120, I'm not going to accrue anything until I go below 80 hours. Not many people utilize that, but that is kind of part and parcel to the use it or lose it type thing, to ensure that they get or they utilize their time off or they risk losing it because of that. So we can do 80. Here we're going to put 120, although that's not accurate because it can really only get 40 hours per year. I don't really need anything in here because it's a yearly accrual. It's 40 hours each year. It's not going to go above that. But I'm just going to put that in there for OCD purposes. I'm going to click Save. And I do need something in there because I did check this. Even though I didn't need to, I did select it. More just to show you what's needed, because if we were going to do by the pay period, then that would have really needed to be in there. Actually, we can uncheck this and just use 0 right in here. That way you can understand the yearly a little better. I don't want to confuse. Now, this is the first 2 years. If I don't have anything different and you get an employee that goes over 2 years, they're not going to accrue anything. I have to define all possible years that somebody could be in the organization in order to accrue time. If I leave it at this, anybody over 2 years is not going to accrue time if they're on this policy. So I need to add a new PTO from the 24th month. Let's go to the end of the 5th year. And maybe they get 60 hours every year. They can carry forward 60, 120, 0, and save. Add another one in there, 60, and I'm just going to call it 9999 and 80 hours every 1 year. You can carry forward 80. They can have a max of 160 in their bank at any given time, and zero this out and save. So now I've got it from now till month 9999. I don't know how many years that is, but it's a few. So that looks good. I can go ahead and save this. And I want to come down here and click save real quick to make sure it goes in, that I haven't made any mistakes before I do the next step, which I edit. And now I need to say when to accrue annually based on their hire date here. I could have chosen that company annual if we had that set up, or a benefit or anniversary, but the way we did this was based on their hire date. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to save that to make sure the system's happy with it. I do this because I don't want to come in and start creating multiple policies, get to the end and save it, and the system just, yeah, we don't understand what you're trying to do, and then I have to start from scratch. So I try to do saves along the way to make sure I haven't screwed something up and minimize the amount of time I might have to go back in and rebuild it because of a mess up that I made. So we have our personal set up. Now we want to do our sick. And again, enable PTO accrual. Come over here and click view. This would actually be one where I want to do a max date because I'm going to do the 1 hour every 30 hours worked. You could exclude things in here. Maybe we're not including vacation. Well, we used personal. We don't use vacation in this one, but that's fine. So I don't want to use personal for it to accrue to that because personal are not worked hours. I want to come down here and select the month, although you can do one or the other because year 0 through year 99, it's going to do the same for this. It's not as tough on me to do a year on a sick time where that same thing applies to all employees no matter how long they've worked there, but I still do my months. It's your call on that. I want to keep it on hours because they get X amount per hours worked. And I come down here and add a new PTO. I do 0, 9999, 1 hour every 30 hours worked. And this depends on company policy on what you allow them to do. You may only allow them to bring 24 hours into the new year of what they didn't use. You can still say their maximum they can have in their account at any given time is 40. And the important bit we want here is the max benefit year accrual. Now, if they bring 24 over and they don't take any sick time and their balance hits 40, it's not going to accrue anything, and they're not going to be able to recoup that accrual in any way, shape, or form. So this is kind of a use it or lose it. But remember, their max accrual is 40, and on the sick time, based on 2,080 hours worked, 2080, they could potentially accrue up to 69 hours. We are just simply stopping it from accruing more than 40. So if they go for 2 months and they're at 40, it's not going to accrue any time for them. They're just basically going to lose that. So once they utilize sick time and say their sick time goes to 24, the next time a pay period's closed, it sees that and it will accrue based on this. But once they have accrued a total of 40 hours, whether it's broken up or in a straight shot, once they've accrued 40 hours, it stops. They can no longer accrue anything throughout the year. So that's where these things differ, and that's why we have this for the sick time. So I go ahead and click save. This looks good. I save this. And before I change anything, I'm just going to click save to make sure that works right. It likes it. I click edit. Come back in here and change this to annually. And on this one, we're using the company annual. So this might be June or July for schools. It might be January for companies that want it. But similarly, they could use the employee's hire date or something like that. It just depends. But I want this to be set at the same that I've got set up here on the max benefit accrual. But again, Company policy could dictate that the max benefit is based on their hire date or anniversary date or something, and then it accrues annually. It resets at the company accrual rollover date. Just depends on company policy as far as that goes. But I've got this set annually, and we go ahead and click save, and there we go. We just make sure we assign the employees, and we can do that from the employee details. And I'm going to open this real quick to show you where those anniversary date and benefit dates are if you needed to use something extra. And that's the benefit and anniversary date here. And you could use these to utilize different segments as far as accruing time goes. So we'll get back out of there. Default profiles. You'll also want to make sure that the profile for that specific PTO plan is added to the correct default profile for when you're importing your employees. They'll come through that. This is important for HR, the HCM companies, but for PPX and time only, you're only going to have one default profile. So if you've got multiple PTO profiles, when they import the employees, they would need to go to the employee detail and make sure they are set on the correct PTO plan that you've created. So I'm going to come back here to configuration of PTO plans. There are a couple of extra things on here. And that is accrue per pay period, accrue per month. They pretty much are the same. If they go by pay period, then this person would get 1 hour every pay period. Normally, you might see something like 2.67 here. Again, when you're doing an hours accrual and they're doing PTO, it might be different from the sick. You might see 0.0819 hours every hour worked, depending on how many hours they accrued throughout the year. You're going to add that in here. For the pay period and monthly, same rules apply when you're doing that. From and to, they get X amount per every month. Carry forward, all that same stuff applies. The only differences would be here. For the monthly, you'll choose specific day and the day of the month you want that accrual to work. Sometimes it might be monthly, but you want it to hit on their hire date rather than a specific date. So we would use daily, and the system would look at their hire date and it would give them their accrual when their hire date comes up, 13th of each month or something like that. Or normally this is for, I think it's either monthly or yearly, but based on how you set their plan up, it would give them their accrual at that specific time on their hire date if we utilize daily. And then we have pay period close, which means when you come up here and close your pay period, that is the point at where it's going to go through. And these pay periods must be closed regularly. Even if they don't need it for their PTO, they've got to be closed regularly. Otherwise, each punch they add is coming all the way back to this date and reprocessing forward. So they need to close these on a regular basis. But when you accrue time based on the pay period or the number of hours worked, the time at which it makes those calculations and applies them to the employee bank is when you close that pay period. As soon as you click close, boom, it makes all the calculations. It assumes everything is perfect, and that's the point it updates the employee's banks. Once you've done that, it's a done deal. If something was wrong in somebody's time card and that affected their accrual, then they really need to calculate that and go into the employee's details, edit the employee, click on their PTO bank, and make that change in the employee's PTO bank for whichever one it was manually. Because if we go back into the back end and open that pay period to allow you to make changes and then reclose it, it's going to double everybody's because it basically just performs that calculation again. So we don't really want to do that. Once that pay period is closed, it's a done deal. So those are the basics on the PTO accruals in the system. They're really quite easy. The only other thing that I could offer as advice is maybe in this PTO plan, the names that were here aren't what we need, or maybe they need a floating holiday, or maybe some other type personal birthday that accrues once a year, something like that, but it's not here. You would need to go to configuration, company setup, and pay types. And I don't have that ability in here on this particular level of access. But then you would add in a personal paid pay type for whatever it is, save it, come back here, and then your choice would now be available. You might have to scroll down to see it, but you could select it and perform the accruals on that, and then you would be good to go. I've logged into a different area to show you those pay types. So company setup, pay types, and then here's our pay types. And if you look at how these are formed here on the different items, vacation would be a good one, edit. We can see things here, although include and blended is really not necessary. Accrued OT is not necessary. You do need to make sure that the code that's going to need to be mapped to payroll is in here, whether it's a letter, a number, or anything else, and then you would save it. So we would basically come here to add new pay type, give it some sort of code, floating holiday, and I want to come down here and choose personal paid. There we go. That's the correct category to use. I don't need to worry about that. Give it a pay type that my payroll earnings code matches with. Make sure it's active. You might want a PT protect. That should be protecting from being deleted over here, but I've just always used that. Include in threshold, and that really should be all I need. I should already have a standard pay type, but if I click save and it tells me there's no standard pay type attached, I would just select that box. But now I've got the floating holiday in here. And if I go to my PTO plans and I click edit, I now see the floating holiday, and I would be able to go in and set this up just like any of my other accruals. So that's all there is to the PTO plans. I don't say that to mean it's easy, because so many companies have so many different variations and tweaks and things like that. But that's the basics of setting up the PTO plans. I hope this helps. Have a good day.